we're human. We think that we make mistakes. We feel, sometimes we have off nights. Machine Head on an off night is still probably better than, like 50% of the bands out there. And Machine Head on a good night is, probably better than 90% of the bands out there.
Machine Head have been through so many transformations of lineup and experimentations in musical direction that they could almost be considered a completely different outfit to the one that Rob Flynn and Adam Duce formed back in 1992. But as one of their most notorious songs has it, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what has remained is the spirit of a band committed to being the hardest, heaviest, most brutal and uncompromising musical force that they can be. A band bound to stay true to themselves and to their own instincts, despite whatever pressures may be brought to bear by record companies, management, radio or MTV. For Machine Head, it's always been about the music, rather than the looks or the lifestyle, and it's this very honesty and commitment to excellence that has kept the fans loyal throughout years of ups and downs, apparent changes in direction, and the departure of key members. Plus the fact that, whatever else they may do, Machine Head will always rock. Robert Flynn was born in Oakland, California, on the 19th of July, 1968. Flynn was raised by foster parents after his genetic mother and father put him up for adoption for unknown reasons. While his surrogate family brought him up entirely as their own in an atmosphere of unconditional love and support, the question of why his natural family abandoned him would haunt Flynn throughout his life. Rob was also a victim of sexual abuse at the age of 5, though not from a member of his immediate family. While he has alluded to it quite openly in several Machine Head songs, Flynn has understandably been reluctant to make the specific details public. Suffice to say, however, that what Rob describes as really horrible shit that happened to him around this time left him with severe mental and emotional scars that devastated his childhood and deeply affected the kind of man he would grow up into. Rob's confusion and turmoil would manifest itself as self-loathing, insecurity, and a physical disgust with his body. He also had an uncontrollable, unfocused anger, particularly against authority figures, and a self-destructive streak a mile wide. He suffered from bulimia, an eating disorder, where he would compulsively binge on then vomit up whatever food was to hand, and also constant crippling headaches that afflicted him every waking hour of every day of his life for a period of 3 years. I even dreamt about headaches, Rob told Rock Sound magazine. The only time it would go away was when I was sparring in jiu-jitsu, and then it would return. The pain was so bad that Rob considered drilling a hole in his skull with his father's drill just to relieve the pressure, an urge he would later revisit in the song Trephination from Machine Head's 2001 album Supercharger. Naturally enough, Rob rebelled at school, his bottled-up anger getting him into constant trouble for fighting and refusing to respect his teachers. He began drinking and experimenting with drugs early on, often turning up for class completely wasted or not turning up at all. Equally naturally, he soon discovered hardcore punk and metal music. In the late 70s and early 80s, Rob's Bay Area stomping ground was home to a cross-pollination of the two musical genres that would result in the ultra-antagonistic, high-energy, no-frills hybrid known as thrash or speed metal. Bands like Testament, Exodus, Sacred Reich and Hyrax, not to mention Los Angeles expatriates Metallica and Megadeth, were all forming and performing at local clubs to an increasingly large and dedicated audience while Flynn was in his mid-teens. It wasn't long before Flynn was hooked. He no longer just wanted to go and see the bands, he wanted to play in one as well.
I mean, we're never trying to recreate Burn My Eyes. And there's a small but kind of vocal group that would like us to do that, but we're just not interested in doing that. We're not interested in trying to write a record that we wrote 11 years ago at this point. We're proud of it, and we'd rather be the band that wrote Burn My Eyes than the band that didn't. but, we're still trying to forge new ground.
After playing a number of gigs as a guitarist with local unsigned thrashers Forbidden Evil, who later achieved some success with the truncated moniker Forbidden, Rob joined the band Violence in early 1987 at the age of 18. Violence had originally formed as Death Penalty in 1985, consisting of guitarists Phil Demmel and Troy Farr, bassists Eddie Billy, Perry Strickland on drums, and Jerry Burr on vocals. By the time Rob replaced Farr on guitar, Sean Killian had already taken over on vocals, and Dean Dell stepped in to replace Billy on bass. With this lineup, they released the 1988 album Eternal Nightmare on Mechanic Records, a riff-heavy slab of Bay Area thrash with Flynn and Demmel's guitar interplay already a standout characteristic. A single of the same name gained notoriety, if not sales, when it was promoted with a plastic vomit bag, actually consisting of a mixture of vegetable soup and vinegar. The band signed to Atlantic Records for their second album, Oppressing the Masses, but the record's release was delayed when the major label bosses objected to the lyrics of the song Torture Tactics, which concerned the use of torture as a political weapon around the world. The track was eventually removed from the album and released as an independent EP in 1991, but by this time the band was already losing momentum, and Flynn was eager to break loose and express himself in a new artistic project of his own creation. Opportunity knocked in the shape of a chance meeting at a party, when Rob was introduced to Adam Duce by their mutual friend, Logan Mader. Adam was drunk and spilt beer on Rob when he shook his hand. Without missing a beat, Rob wiped the beer off on Adam's hair, and their friendship was sealed. At this point, Rob was still in Violence, but both he and Adam were so hard up that at one point they seriously considered robbing a Domino Pizza delivery boy. Nevertheless, the trio had already decided to try and put a band together, and from their first jam session, the chemistry just clicked. Adam and Logan had been friends since childhood, and Rob had known Logan for the past 3 years. Taking their name from a classic album by old-school metal legends Deep Purple, the trio began writing and rehearsing new material in earnest. With former Verbal Abuse drummer Chris Kontos on board, Rob handed in his notice to the guys in Violence, and Machine Head recorded a demo tape, which Kontos distributed by throwing copies into the audience on Exodus's 1993 tour, while he was moonlighting on the drums with the speed metal legends. This brought them to the attention of punk and metal label Roadrunner Records, who signed them in 1993, the same year that the band set out on their inaugural North American tour, opening for Napalm Death and Obituary. On their return home to California, Machine Head went straight into the studio with respected English producer Colin Richardson to begin work on their debut album, the instant classic that was Burn My Eyes.
I didn't really know what, not that I know what I'm doing now, but I really didn't know what I was doing then. I was just kind of like writing what I felt was right, and just like my perspective on stuff. And as I've gone along, I've grown as a person. I've had experiences in life, and I just carry all those things with me, and I write about them, or I don't write about them.
While defiantly unrepentant about its origins in the 80s thrash metal scene, Burn My Eyes ups the ante by simply making everything heavier. The guitars, the drums, and Rob's harsh vocals, which draw on personal experience to paint graphic pictures of apocalyptic pain and violence. With their long hair and longer goatee beards, the band on the CD sleeve looked like members of some backwoods mountain militia or breakaway religious cult, and the lyrics reinforce this image with "End is nigh" prophesying, and visions of the world gone mad, in need more of divine retribution than salvation. The opening track is even titled Davidian, after the Branch Davidian sect led by David Koresh, whose members largely perished in flames at their Waco, Texas compound on April 19, 1993. The chorus of the Machine Head song, "Let Freedom Ring with a Shotgun Blast," suggests some degree of sympathy with those who take up arms to defend their right to live apart from mainstream American society. Musically, Davidian opens with a blunt dual guitar attack and a hammering bass drum over which Rob's scorched earth vocals holler with a mixture of fierce anger and spent world weariness that belie his 26 years. He also contributes a squealing, squalling guitar solo that avoids mere technical flash and hackneyed metal cliches in favour of real inventiveness and power. The same spiralling, high, rootless guitar notes continue to circle on the complex opening bass and drum interplay of old, before the song is nailed down by a sledgehammer rhythm guitar part that keeps it moving forward with a single-minded intensity. The track was chosen as Machine Head's first single and sets out its agenda with its whispered spoken intro: corruption, hate, the church has failed. Jesus came down and he died. It positions the Antichrist as central to modern society over relentless, down-tuned riffing. The next song, 1,000 Lies, is a powerful, grinding number with an almost conventionally melodic chorus and several tempo changes, including a speeding wah-wah-assisted guitar solo from Rob. None But My Own hammers in on waves of crunching guitar, interspersed by gentler passages of sinister foreboding, as Rob alternates between the deep growl he has used so far and a slightly higher-pitched singing voice, in a lyric that explores Nietzsche's dictum that which does not kill us makes us stronger. The same theme continues in Rage to Overcome, before the album's second single, Death Church, opens with the voice of a TV evangelist, distorted and slowed down to sound more like a cliched Hollywood representation of Satan. A bitter satire on religion, as big business and the hypocritical conformist morality of society as a whole, Death Church is a slow, churning beast of a song, moving forward as relentlessly as a great glacier of black ice, lashed with high guitar notes like distant lightning. A Nation on Fire opens with a seductive acoustic blues folk guitar figure from Logan, as the storm clouds of bass, drums, and screaming shards of electric guitar gather around its fragile serenity. The uneasy balance finally erupts as the chorus approaches, only for the tension to renew itself on the second verse. Finally, on the third verse, the song explodes into a full-on torrent of blurred guitars, bass and drums racing each other blindly into the inferno, which finally arrives in the shape of a more high, free-form guitar squall over a raging chaos of murky, distorted noise. And then the race is on once more, straight into the next track, Blood on Blood, a no-holds-barred assault on those deserving of retribution. I'm Your God Now once again opens with a lilting, melodic guitar part, this time over militaristic snare drum paradiddles. Rob's vocals add to the feeling of a soldier's lament, sung in his high voice before deepening into a roaring chorus as a battalion of armoured guitars crash in behind him. The song builds to a shuddering climax, out of which that haunting lone guitar figure echoes forlornly once more into the empty night. Realize, Realize, Real Lies is essentially an instrumental punctuated by samples of TV news bulletins depicting a world gone mad, burning with rage, violence, greed and racism, torn apart by riots and exploited by cynical politicians and businessmen. The sense of impending apocalypse is heightened by the repeated sample saying, "America has to go through some kind of radical change," and Rob's only lyrical contribution, the title phrase. Block, finally, is a near inarticulate rage against a world of senseless violence and corruption, and the chorus simply a repeated cry of "fuck it all," as if the band had at last gone beyond words, beyond reason, into blind, nihilistic despair. The bonus track, Alan's on Fire, is a cover of a song by underground hardcore legends Poison Idea. Burn My Eyes is considered by many to be the best and most important metal album of the 90s. It reinvented and reinvigorated the thrash metal subgenre, an area rapidly disappearing into a blind alley of its own making, and in so doing injected a new dose of power and intensity into the rock mainstream. The album would become the biggest selling debut in Roadrunner Records' history and would launch Machine Head upon the world as a definite force to be reckoned with.
I try not to ever write things like really too timely. You know, I don't really like writing about like a specific incident that happened, you know, because I want our music to be a little more timeless than that. But, you know, it's all a learning experience to me. You know, I love learning, and I just try and continue to learn as much as I can in writing.
Drummer Chris Kontos left Machine Head immediately after the recording of Burn My Eyes. He was briefly replaced by Possessed drummer Walter Ryan for a series of gigs before the band recruited ex-Sacred Reich stickman Dave McClain in time for the opening slot on the Divine Intervention roadshow, opening for Biohazard and Slayer. Playing with Slayer was a dream come true for Machine Head. Slayer were the reigning kings of extreme metal, the band who had pushed back the boundaries of the genre further than anyone else on classic albums like Rain in Blood and South of Heaven. When Burn My Eyes came out, our goals were basically to record an album, and if we could open for Slayer when they played the Henry J. Kaiser in Oakland, we would be the kings of the world, Rob would later recall. When they were offered the support slot for the entire European leg of Slayer's tour, their expectations were already far surpassed. But then they were subsequently offered the support slot for the American tour as well. So, not only did they get to play the Henry J. Kaiser Stadium, they got to open for Slayer every night for 5 months, while seeing the world and watching their own fan base rapidly expanding. Indeed, expectations were rapidly being surpassed in many quarters. Machine Head had always had a clear and powerful vision of how they wanted their debut album to sound, and in realising that vision, they had done enough for any band to be proud of. But not even they could have predicted the impact that Burn My Eyes would have upon its release in 1994. The album's success was as much by accident as design. For all the band's long discussions about the music they loved, what they wanted to emulate, what they wanted to improve upon, and what they wanted to get rid of altogether, they were still, in Rob's own words, just 4 dickheads jamming. But together they captured some kind of chemistry, some kind of magic that communicated extremely powerfully to bored, disaffected, angry kids like them all over the world, all of them hungry for something new, fierce, and bullshit-free. Machine Head were giving it to them, and they were touring their arses off to make sure that the world got to hear what they were offering. It's impossible to overestimate how important touring was to breaking Burn My Eyes. There's no guarantee that a great, even groundbreaking record will be a hit if no one gets to hear about it. And with Machine Head, there was no hype, no front covers of magazines, no heavy radio play or MTV exposure. Burn My Eyes was sold the old-fashioned way, by hard work and word of mouth. The band spent nearly 2 solid years on the road, by the end of which time Burn My Eyes had sold over 400,000 copies. Their live shows opening for Slayer in Europe drew them rave reviews in the local rock press, and as a result, they were invited to play the prestigious Monsters of Rock festival at Castle Donington in the UK in 1995 as Slayer's special guests. Also appearing that year were Metallica, Pantera and White Zombie, some heavy company to keep, but Machine Head more than held their own and for many were the surprise highlight of the event. Machine Head returned home to Oakland as conquering heroes, prodigal sons made good. By the end of 1995, Burn My Eyes was recognised as a classic rock album, and Machine Head as an important new band who were on the cutting edge of the metal scene. In addition, Dave McClain had proved himself to be a vital and permanent part of the band, undergoing the baptism of fire of a gruelling 15-month world tour and emerging as an integral component in the machine. But the real work had only just begun, as coming off tour the band were offered no opportunity to rest on their laurels. Instead, they had to go back into the studio to create the follow-up to a debut album that had already been acclaimed as a masterpiece. The pressure was on.
I can look back on every single record from Burn My Eyes on forward that I hear stuff that I would have done differently. Like, even as soon as I was done with Burn My Eyes, there was things that I would have done differently. You know, I think part of that is what drives me. it does drive me to try and always make something better or improve on what we've done.
After touring constantly for much of 1994 and 1995, Machine Head played only 3 shows throughout the whole of 1996. The first half of the year was spent on writing and honing new material, attempting to come up with an album that would not only match the power and intensity of its predecessor, but which would surpass it in terms of songwriting, dynamics, and innovation. With Burn My Eyes, no one had any expectations of how it should sound. The band were largely left to their own devices to come up with whatever they wanted. For the follow-up, however, they had set themselves almost impossibly high standards which their record company, the press, and their fans, none of whom they'd had to worry about on the last record, expected them not only to match, but to exceed. Roadrunner, in particular, wanted Machine Head's second album to take them on up to the next level in terms of both artistic achievement and commercial sales. The band themselves responded to the pressure with a perfectionism that may ultimately have done them more harm than good. Once a song was done, we didn't just settle on that, Rob remembered. We were completely changing riffs, throwing out riffs and restructuring it until we were happy. Such effort and over-analysis of songs may be why in places some of the material on The More Things Change sounds laboured and flat compared to the spontaneity and freshness of much of Burn My Eyes. The band were keen to show how much they developed as musicians, while showcasing Dave McClain's technically dazzling drumming, and at the same time, they also wanted to stretch out and experiment a bit more, to write longer songs and incorporate broader influences, from rock to hip-hop, extreme metal to hardcore punk. Running parallel to these instincts, however, was the desire to stay true to the formula of Burn My Eyes that had been so successful, even though, of course, there was no formula. But the very fact that their success was so unexpected meant that the band themselves were unsure if they could replicate it. For all the desire to experiment, they also wanted to keep on giving their fans what they wanted, a conformist streak strongly encouraged by the record company. The band's extensive touring also affected their songwriting, as they noticed the different reactions that songs from the first album would get when they played them live. We were surprised to see that 1 or 2 of the songs off the last album that seemed to be people's favourites on the record didn't seem to work as well live, Rob said. We definitely took that into account when putting together the songs for the new record, since we're going to play most of the new material live for the next 2 years, and we wanted to make sure that all the songs would translate well to a live situation. The More Things Change opens with the single 10-Ton Hammer, a blisteringly heavy, pseudo-gothic anthem that adds a commercial sheen to the uncompromising brutality of the Machine Head sound to date. With its radio-friendly chorus and high-gloss production values, it's either raising the band's game to a new level or a sellout to the forces of commerciality, depending on your point of view. Take My Scars continues in similar vein, a pounding disavowal of heroin addiction, ignorance, and all false idols. Rob's guitar solo is preceded by a few seconds of DJ scratching in the band's first open nod towards hip-hop culture. Struck a Nerve, however, takes it right back to the old school, one for the hardcore. It is hardcore, a nihilistic blast of high-speed thrash with a brooding gothic guitar break and a chorus that gives the album its title. The more things change, the more they stay the same. With its lengthy instrumental intro, Down to None is another uncompromising, angry epic, consisting of over 5 minutes of ferocious guitar abuse and drum slaughter. The Front Lines is an effective balancing of the band's hardcore ethos with their commercial instincts, punctuated by a powerful driving guitar solo from Logan. After another near 6-minute epic in Spine, Bay of Pigs is a hardcore punk thrash with a slowed-down chorus, clearing the way for the album's harrowing centerpiece, Violate. This is the first song on which Rob broaches the subject of the sexual abuse he suffered as a child, and after 6 minutes of barely suppressed rage, pain and anguish all still turned inward, anger eating away at the soul, it explodes into a further 1.5 minutes of violent, all-consuming destruction and lashing out. After that, Blistering is as visceral as the title suggests, while Blood of the Zodiac is a suitably impressive and ambitious number for the album to end on, and concludes with a simple repeated call to arms cry of rise. Shot through with religious Old Testament imagery of suffering and revenge, pain and disease, slavery, cruelty and retribution from on high, The More Things Change is, if anything, an even more personal album than its predecessor. The ills of society outlined on Burn My Eyes, internalised to devastating effect. This is reinforced by the images of global oppression and torture that feature on the CD booklet, and the picture on the inside case of a mummified man whose prison bars have become part of his own body. While in some ways it falls between two stools, torn between the band's desire to change and develop and the pressure to repeat the formula of Burn My Eyes, taken on its own terms, The More Things Change is undoubtedly a masterful album with a depth and quality that repays closer listening. You can't please everyone all the time, but Machine Head's art and integrity remained intact.
Well, he left. He basically became unhappy with playing heavy music. He wanted to, write in a mellower style, and, we wanted to go, along with our same heavy style, if not go heavier again, and we just didn't feel that it would be productive for him to continue along. We just didn't feel it would be productive for the band or anybody personally. So he ended up going, and we're a lot happier, man. And I think he's a lot happier as well.
The More Things Change was a difficult album to make. The pressure on the band was compounded by Dave and Adam both being involved in a serious car accident during the recording, and increasing tension between the band members in the studio. Nevertheless, Machine Head immediately took the album on the road as soon as it was finished, with a headlining tour of the UK in 1997, supported by Napalm Death and Skin Lab, followed by stadium support slots opening for Pantera in Europe and Megadeth in the US. Despite this grueling live schedule, Flynn also found time to sing guest vocals on the album Breed the Killers by New York straight-edge band Earth Crisis that same year. But cracks were definitely beginning to surface in the Machine Head camp, and something was going to have to give. In 1998, Logan Mader quit Machine Head. He joined Soulfly, Max Cavalera of Sepultura's new band, before going on to form his new outfit, Mistis, and later, the Pale Demons. His departure was not amicable. Machine Head were a tight-knit unit, and the remaining band members felt that Logan had betrayed them and let them down. Bassist Adam Duce took the split particularly badly. Logan Mader was his oldest friend, and the pair had known each other for nearly 20 years, going back to childhood. But when their musical partnership finished, so did that friendship. Machine Head was not just something you could walk out on. The band was too important for that. Logan's replacement was Aru Luster, formerly of Man-Made God, Horde of Torment and Pestilence. The change of guitarists coincided with a period of reflection and re-evaluation within the band, as they paused to consider where they wanted to go next after the lukewarm reception afforded The More Things Change. The influx of new blood and the obvious effect that a new guitarist would have on a band's sound were a catalyst for Rob, Adam, Dave and Aru to take Machine Head in an entirely new direction, and to make the record that they'd hoped would be the defining moment of their career. To this end, they recruited producer Ross Robinson, who had originally played guitar in a band with Dave McClain, but was now better known for his work with Korn and Limp Bizkit. They returned to the studio, determined to push themselves to the limit, to broaden their musical template far beyond the genre limitations of thrash metal, creating instead a record that would be a masterpiece in any field. Machine Head knew that they had to change in order to survive, that you either grow forward or pay more for trying to stay the same. For all its strengths, The More Things Change was the sound of a band painting themselves into a corner. The Burning Red was Machine Head's way of kicking down the walls and breaking into another space entirely.
We wrote 24 songs and narrowed it down to the 10 best songs, and those are the songs we recorded. As they stand now, they weren't good enough to make this record, so, unless something drastically gets reinvented in those riffs, which is possible, but more than likely not.
The changes that are afoot on The Burning Red, Machine Head's third album, can be gleaned just from a glance at the pictures of the band that adorn the CD's sleeve. Gone, with one exception, is the long hair and even longer goatees that gave the band the appearance of austere mountain druids or some backwoods Amish militia. Only bassist Adam Duce still gives that familiar, unsettling, steely glare from behind the facial fur of a moonshine-crazed serial killer. Drummer Dave McClain has shaved his head back to a peachy fuzz, dyed a brilliant bleach blonde, and patterned with leopard print spots, while Rob Flynn retains only the merest tuft of black beard on the end of his chin, with his hair also dyed blonde and cut back to a spiky, punkish crop. New guitarist Aru Luster, meanwhile, sports dreadlocks and a star-spangled shell suit. It is doubtless with a sense of some trepidation that the long-term Machine Head fan first slips the CD into the deck. All doubts are unfounded, however, as after the ambient fade-in of Enter the Phoenix, the album opens properly with Desire to Fire. Rob has a new rasp to his vocals as he delivers a self-referential, self-celebration of the mighty force that is Machine Head in the boastful style more typical of hip-hop music than heavy metal. The vocal may be verging on rapping, but the music beneath is typical Machine Head of the first order, pulverising down-tuned guitars and thundering drums. There is, however, a tense, scratchy sound to The Burning Red that is in stark contrast to the fat, full production job on The More Things Change. Not that The Burning Red sounds cheap, lo-fi or underproduced, far from it, but it does sound deliberately lean and dangerous, like a hungry, red-eyed animal with its back against the wall and fangs bared. This is an album with everything to prove, glistening and stripped down, without an ounce of excess fat upon its tightly coiled muscles. Free from bloated clichés, it is all killer and no filler, fine-tuned to cause maximum devastation. Nothing Left is a violent howl of nihilism and alienation, while The Blood, the Sweat, the Tears is the album's most anthemic moment so far, albeit one still rooted in the grit and pain of real life. Silver is a ballad of sorts, though without ever becoming maudlin, sentimental or predictable. It takes no prisoners, and for all its heaviness resists the temptation to soar into a huge cornball chorus. The next track, From This Day, is possibly the album's most controversial moment, and one can imagine the hardcore thrash fans' mouths dropping open as they hear Rob Flynn launching into a full-blown rap over scratching, chopped-up riffs. The chorus displays a catchy pop melodicism, while a close listen to the lyrics reveals that this is Machine Head actually doing a straight-up love song. "And I thank my God I've got a girl like you," Rob sings. And why shouldn't he? Why shouldn't Machine Head incorporate rap or pop sensibilities into their songs? And why shouldn't they sing about the positive human emotions as well as the negative ones? If you're going to make a band as important as your life, then you've got to allow them to incorporate all aspects of life, not just those that extreme metal is supposed to recognise. Exhale the Vile continues the theme of transforming the negative into a positive, with the lyric, "This integrity is what I breathe. I'll inhale this life I gave to you and exhale the vile." Rob stomps moodily between your speakers, while guitars alternately needle and pound. But Sacrilege once again rears its controversial head on track 8, a straight-faced cover of the old Police favourite, Message in a Bottle. Perhaps starting the whole new metal trend for semi-ironic cover versions of 80s pop hits, this is actually a faithful and reverential rendition, with no evidence of tongues going anywhere near cheeks. Obviously, it's about 90 million times heavier than the original, but Machine Head still play with a respect and a subtlety that results ultimately in nothing more or less than a powerful updating of a great pop song. Devil with the King's Card is a grinding and vindictive put-down of a traitorous spirit, supposed by many to be aimed at departed guitarist Logan Mader. Its bludgeoning riffs dissolve into a cure-like descending organ part before the band unleashed the full force of their spleen and bitterness again. I Defy is a powerful, driving slab of angry goth metal that spits in the faces of the band's detractors and clears the way for the album's most personal and powerful track, 5. This returns again to the subject of Rob's childhood sexual abuse, in even more explicit terms, so much so that the only lyrics made publicly available are the 2 words printed in the CD booklet, "Innocence Lost." Rob talks of his fear and shame, his feelings of betrayal and near suicidal anguish that have stayed with him his entire life, in a song that is all the more harrowing and disturbing for its refusal to sensationalize its subject matter. The music behind is powerful yet subdued, respectful even, never flashy or posturing. After that, the album ends with the title track, all haunting, subdued guitars fluttering and chiming in the void over a minimal, compressed drum beat. Throughout, Rob croons and keens almost prettily. It is as though all the rage expended on the previous track has left the band spent, calm, even reflective. The Burning Red was criticised as being Machine Head's rap rock record, a verdict based unfairly on just one track, From This Day, and possibly elements of Desire to Fire as well. Producer Ross Robinson was quoted as saying that he was not down with that Adidas rock thing. "I told Rob that I can't do the next record if there's any rapping or any sort of funky spacesuits." Many magazines slated the album as Machine Head jumping aboard some commercial bandwagon, as it turned out to be their biggest seller yet in the US. But the absurdity of such criticisms aside, why shouldn't Machine Head mix metal with hip-hop? The fact is that The Burning Red is quite patently not a rap rock record. If anything stands out, it is an increased melodic sensibility, and Robinson's atmospheric production leans more towards goth than rap. Both lyrically and musically, the band display a newfound maturity, from the courage of Rob confronting his personal demons on 5, to the overall impression of the singer finally conquering his pain and coming to terms with his own emotional balance, turning his anger from a bitterness that could destroy him from within into a positive energy, and learning to live, to love, and to grow. The Burning Red is the album that Machine Head had to make in order to survive. If not quite their defining masterpiece, it's certainly a magnificent body of work and a bold development of their sound.
It's all like little fine-tuning stuff. It's probably like 1 or 2%, of things that I'd change or whatever. Just like little details here that like no one else in their anybody would ever even hear. Like even if I pointed it out to you, you'd probably think I was just like smoking crack or something,
On The Burning Red, Rob Flynn began to deal with his deep personal issues in the public arena. At the same time, he began to come to terms with them in his private life. In 1997, he finally overcame the bulimia that he'd been struggling with since childhood, and by 2000, he was married and beginning the process of building a stable family life for himself. He admitted that up until the period of writing 5, he had been suppressing his pain and coming close to losing his mind as a result. By admitting to his weaknesses and insecurities, rather than avoiding them and pretending that everything was great, he was able to come out of denial and actually start to deal with his problems. Other members of Machine Head also had difficulties to contend with. Drink and drugs had always been present, and the entire group had indulged to a greater or lesser extent ever since they were teenage punks on the Bay Area thrash scene. But by the end of the 90s, bassist Adam Duce in particular was overindulging to an extent that was damaging both his personal life and his work in the band. His way of dealing with the continuing personal tensions between band members was simply to drink himself into oblivion. But by the time the band finished touring The Burning Red, it was obvious that this was no solution. And while Adam was struggling to sort himself out, drummer Dave McClain briefly decided that he'd had enough and quit the band. Rumour had it that he was on the verge of joining Systematic, but within a week he was back in Machine Head. Rob Flynn blamed the tension on a combination of personal problems and the pressures on the band from outside. Media intrusion, gossip, backbiting from other bands, none of these things helped as Machine Head realised that part of the deal with being rock stars is having to wash your dirty laundry in public. In the end though, what it really came down to was a lack of communication within the band. Eventually all 4 members sat down and talked through their problems. They also discussed their plans for the new album. "You get all of these people telling you what you should be doing," Rob said at the time. "But we were only concerned with what the 4 of us wanted to achieve, because we were the ones who have to stand behind it." But a couple of years later, the band's frontman had revised his opinion of the situation somewhat. "There was a lot of compromising going on," he admitted. "Sometimes you listen to the wrong people. If you owe somebody $1 million, you consider doing what they say." It certainly seems that tensions hit an all-time high during the making of Machine Head's 4th album. But at the same time, the band were most concerned with making the best possible record they could under the circumstances. Rob, in particular, worked harder than ever before on his lyrics, filling 3 notebooks with material before honing it down. All 4 members were contributing musical ideas, and at the end of the album sessions, Machine Head had 22 songs to choose from, of which they picked the best 12. Nevertheless, the songwriting period was undoubtedly fraught, with the band almost coming to blows on many occasions. Eventually, however, the songs were ready, and the group entered the studio early in 2001 with producer Johnny Kay, ready to record the collection of tracks that would come to be known as Supercharger.
And to me, as selfish as it may sound, it's like I don't really care what everybody else thinks. I'm very much just like into what I'm being happy playing. Ultimately, it's the 4 of us are the only 4 people who have to stand behind the record and play the record night in and night out. And so if we're getting off on it, then we're getting off on it.
Supercharger begins in suitably portentous style, with a nightmarish science fiction announcement of declaration. An increasingly agitated, distorted or mechanized voice insists "you must declare" over wailing sirens and churning noise, until, with a cry of "charge" and a cackle of demonic laughter from Rob, the band hurtles straight into the no-nonsense riffing of Bulldozer. Another statement of power and defiance akin to Desire to Fire on the Burning Red, it's followed by the juddering hymn to adrenaline that is White Knuckle Blackout. The ill-fated single, Crashing Around You, is an obvious attempt to write an anthemic, radio-friendly track to follow From This Day, from the previous album into the charts. A semi-rapped verse collides with a soaring chorus that could almost be the work of Nickelback or other similar FM radio-straddling behemoths. Kick You When You're Down reverses conventional post-grunge wisdom by welding a loud, heavy verse to a quieter, quasi-psychedelic chorus. And after a gothic flanged guitar intro reminiscent of The Cure on their Faith album, Only the Names explodes into a tense, brooding depiction of the horrors of drug addiction. Flynn admitted that it was written from personal experience of smoking the powerful, addictive methamphetamine known as crank. "I haven't done speed in years and have no desire to, but wrote the song from the point of view of temptation speaking to me," he told Rock Sound magazine in 2001. "It is definitely a journey into the heart of darkness." All in Your Head sounds like it could have been another potential single, with its speed-rapped verse over churning guitars climbing into an anthemic chorus bolstered by rolling tribal drums. The light relief of American High follows, opening with a jokey Tarzan yodel before a hissed "oh my god" launches us into a snare-driven riff custom made for the mosh pit. This falls away for the speed-rapped verse, wherein Rob details his high school drink and drug habits, his dissatisfaction, alienation and rebellion, and the salvation he found in rock. After the brief but disturbing squiggles of brown acid, Nausea stomps along in a miasma of bad attitude and aggressive pummeling guitars. The slow-burning rage of Blank Generation is laced with distortion, effects, and tempo changes as Rob spits forth a torrent of bile and disgust against today's worthless plastic society. Despite sharing its title with an old punk classic by Richard Hell, who coined the phrase, Blank Generation couldn't have been written at any other time than the beginning of the 21st century. Trephination is possibly the album's heaviest and most unrelenting track, as over-rolling tribal drums and scything wah-wah guitar, Rob details his childhood fantasies of drilling a hole in his head to relieve his migraines. It's followed by the near ballad Deafening Silence, though even this is blessed with a pounding, angry chorus, and the album ends with its title track, another celebration of the power that the four individuals in Machine Head can channel when they come together. It's true enough, but it's a shame that, as a whole, Supercharger fails to fire on all cylinders.
Phil joined in April, and most of the songs had been written prior to him joining, but he was there for the writing of a few songs, and him and I co-wrote 2 songs on the record.
After the creative rebirth of The Burning Red, Supercharger frankly sounded like the work of a band that had lost its way. There were some strong songs on the record, but overall it sounded like a compromise between a band in turmoil and the men in suits who wanted to shift 1 million units, but didn't have the first idea of why Machine Head were successful in the first place. The result was an uncomfortable mix of the melodicism and hip-hop influenced commercialism of The Burning Red and the overinflated production of The More Things Change. The worst of both worlds, in other words, held together by a spurious science fiction concept that sat uneasily with a band known for their down-to-earth honesty and raw, no-frills approach. To make matters worse, Supercharger was released on the eve of arguably the worst day in the history of the world to release a rock album, September the 11th, 2001. While the world watched in horror as the World Trade Towers in New York went down in flames, Machine Head were attempting to promote the first single from their LP, the unfortunately titled Crashing Around You. Unsurprisingly, the song received absolutely zero radio play, television or press coverage, and the record company promptly buried both it and the album. A half-hearted attempt to put out Deafening Silence as a single instead did little better. It was the beginning of a downward spiral in which Machine Head attempted to tour the album regardless, but found themselves playing to half-empty venues due to lack of promotion and the general economic downturn. Relationships with Roadrunner Records in the US also broke down, to the extent that Machine Head recorded a live album, Hell Alive, at London's Brixton Academy on the still well-attended European leg of the tour, just to fulfil their contract and get off the label. Within the band as well, things were little better, with tensions between guitarist Aru Luster and the rest of the group rapidly coming to a head. That guy was a kind of wannabe Zen master, Adam Duce later commented. He tried to make out that he was a spiritual Yoda or some shit. Whenever there were problems, he'd just shut the fuck up instead of saying what needed to be said. After a tour in which the guitarist would spend 13 hours a day sat playing video games at the back of the bus, Machine Head regrouped to consider where they were going next. Aru wanted to do half heavy and half mellow, but that wasn't where we were going with it, Rob recalled later. The result was Luster's departure from the band, with him claiming that Rob ran Machine Head like a dictatorship, a statement belied by the fact that the new record, like its predecessors, would be very much a group effort as far as the songwriting went. Machine Head meanwhile began writing and recording as a 3-piece, with Adam contributing on guitar as well as bass. In many ways, Machine Head went back to basics and started all over again. Finding themselves without a record label and without any pressure to come up with product by a certain date, they felt like a new band, with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The new material was written primarily to satisfy themselves as musicians, and they found themselves stretching out songs to 6 or 7 minutes, as well as going back to the wall of guitars sound of their first 2 albums. They fell in love with music all over again, listening to a whole load of new bands and rediscovering some classics from the past. Rush, in particular, were a big influence on Machine Head's creative rebirth. Not so much musically, as in the fact that they never compromised or sold out, despite being under enormous pressure to be a commercial band. Having decided that their new album was going to be their heaviest yet, it was obvious that Machine Head were going to have to recruit another guitarist to replace Luster. They chose Rob Flynn's old friend and musical partner from 80s Bay Area thrash band Violence, Phil Demmel. Having written and played together in the past, the chemistry was instant, and Phil's presence restored a sense of camaraderie in the band that had been missing for some time. The album does feel like a new beginning, Dave McClain said. Supercharger now feels like an end to some evolution that was going on musically. It was time for Machine Head to rise again.
I mean, he's a kick-ass guitar player. I mean, the guy's awesome. He's definitely like a riff maniac too. Like which is what's great with him. Like his style very much complements ours. Phil and I are very much like a guitar team. And I mean that in the kind of classic sense and also like almost the cliched sense.
Machine Head released their 5th studio album, Through the Ashes of Empires, on the 27th of October 2003, to almost unanimous critical acclaim. Generally felt to be their best work since their debut, it was a return to their hard and heavy roots, a bold updating of the extreme metal template with which they first burst upon the world nearly 10 years earlier. Right from the opening track, Imperium, with its furious hammering riff and no-holds-barred guitar assault, it's more than clear that Machine Head are back with a vengeance. Rob roars like a man possessed, his rapping days apparently behind him, while there are enough old-school metal dynamics going on to bring a smile to the face of many a dyed-in-the-wool headbanger. Bite the Bullet is a tense, rhythmic monster, climbing to climax after climax and then continually dropping back down to a white heat, slow-burning fuse. One of the album's highlights is Left Unfinished, in which Rob airs his feelings of resentment, abandonment, pain and confusion towards his natural parents who gave him up as a child, while expressing nothing but love for his surrogate family. Opening with the sound of a nursery music box, it's a symphony of unadulterated rage with a soaring, harmonised chorus. Elegy is another powerful number that builds and builds gradually towards its conclusion, battering like waves against your skull until the walls threaten to cave in, while In the Presence of My Enemies is quite simply classic Machine Head. Rob sings of biblical vengeance, those who have abused and assaulted him in the past, and his desire to protect his family at all costs, over raging riffs and a defiantly old-school guitar solo. Days Turn Blue to Grey is inspired by the incapacity and death of Rob's stepfather, and an acknowledgement of the love and support he gave to Rob as a depressed, out-of-control teenager. The heaviness is countered by a beautifully melodic middle eight, before the pounding bass drum powers us back up to the explosive finale. The no-frills aggression of Vim is followed by possibly the album's most radio-friendly number, the classically structured rocker All Fall Down. Then, Wipe Away the Tears is another, possibly final, exorcism of Rob's personal demons, in which he sings once again of his feelings of failure, abandonment, betrayal and self-loathing, before concluding that at the end of the day he's got to move on and fight for the right to live his life. The album ends with the amazing, near 8-minute epic, Descend the Shades of Night. Beginning as a haunting acoustic ballad, it explodes into a pulverizing industrial metal monster before building to an anthemic Wagnerian chorus via a coruscating guitar solo. Possibly Machine Head's most ambitious song to date, it's a fitting closure to an album that sees them unquestionably at the top of their game, exceeding their own high standards, and setting a new benchmark for metal albums to come.
I just kind of go with a gut feeling. I go with what I'm enjoying doing, and not everybody may enjoy what that is, but if I enjoy it, then that's what matters to me, because it's like I'm the one who's playing it. I'm the one who has to play it night in and night out, and that's what I'm having fun playing.
October the 31st, 2003. It's Halloween in Dublin, and, fueled by Guinness and vodka, a huge surging crowd of freaks and mutants, monsters, moshers, misfits and metalheads are gathered in the city's Ambassador Theatre, ready to party. The reason, apart from the spontaneous celebration of anarchy, imagination and the dark side traditional to the date, can be summed up in 3 simple words: Machine fucking Head. The boys are back in town. It's the opening night of the band's 2003 European tour, a series of sellout dates that will see them wind up in Leipzig on December the 19th, before returning to tour the US in the new year. Over their decade-plus long existence, Machine Head's fans have remained some of the most loyal and committed in the business. I'm glad Machine Head have stuck to their guns, Korn's Jonathan Davis told Metal Hammer magazine in the wake of Through the Ashes of Empires, and it's a statement that represents exactly what Machine Head mean to their legions of admirers. Machine Head are a band that have never sold out, mellowed with age, compromised, or given ground. Through all their ups and downs, they have remained a band that you can believe in. At the Ambassador Theatre in Dublin, the band come on stage to a hero's welcome, all dressed in Halloween costume. Rob Flynn, perhaps inevitably, has come as the devil. With Adam, Dave and Phil behind him, he tears into the likes of Imperium from the new album as if they were already recognised classics, and the fans respond in kind. The mosh pit is a seething mass of frenzied humanity, and many of the fans down the front will still be there when the tour winds up on the other side of Europe 6 weeks later. For Machine Head are that kind of band, the kind that inspire their followers to blow their life savings in order to see them play the same set maybe 30 nights in a row. They're the kind of band that inspires devotion. Machine Head provide catharsis and celebration. They express the pain and frustration that everyone feels within and let it out with the force of a hurricane blast. A Machine Head show is a chance to violently expel all those corrupting demons that are eating away at your soul, in a consensual setting where the most harm that you're going to do to yourself or anyone else is the inflicting of a few friendly bruises. But they also express strength in adversity, a determination not to be crushed or defeated, and an awesome power that's within every one of us. For all their imagery of negativity, nihilism, rage, despair and alienation, Machine Head ultimately offers something very positive. And it's this that keeps the fans coming back, time after time. This that has sustained the group through years of trials and tensions. Machine Head are stronger than anyone, and they will not be destroyed.
Thanks for buying Maximum Machine Head. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy it or have any further comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT36YY, or email on mail@chromedreams.co.uk. Details of our full catalogue are listed on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye for now.